Welcome to Eugene Cannabis TV. Made the trip. We've got Jeremy with us tonight, and glad to have you come in, Jeremy. Good to see you again. Been gone too long. Jeremy's been working with the Boy Scouts now, and you having fun with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Did you go camping? Last time I talked to you, was you going to go you're snow camping or something?
There wasn't any snow for the snow camp out, but we went there anyway.
That's right. You were short of snow for the snow camp out. All right. Okay, well, go ahead and we'll start off on the first story. Jeremy's going to read this one for us. This is about our friend Elvy Musikka.
Elderly woman gets medical marijuana from the federal government by Sarah Parrish. Advocates for medical marijuana rallied at the state capitol Tuesday, calling for lawmakers to legalize its use here. Among them was 75-year-old Elvy Musikka, who is one of only 4 patients approved by the federal government to use it. The glaucoma patient has been smoking medical marijuana for 40 years, the past 27 of which has been supplied under the Compassionate Investigational New Drug Program, or IND. Musikka travels from her home state of Oregon to Florida once a year to pick up her supply at the University of Miami. It has made such an incredible difference in my life, she tells WSB's Sandra Parrish. House leaders are currently pushing a bill that would provide immunity from prosecution for bringing cannabis oil only into Georgia from other states where it's legal. Right now, its use would be limited to 17 illnesses, including children with seizure disorders. Musikka says she believes it should be available to anyone who needs it, regardless of their medical condition. It works with our brain and entire body. It is a sin to keep it illegal for us at every level, she says. Currently, 23 states allow access to the whole plant medical marijuana, with recreational use approved in Colorado and Washington State. And it passed this session in Oregon and Washington, D.C., as well as Alaska, I believe.
Right, yeah, it's interesting that they didn't mention Alaska and Oregon, but yeah, that's Elvy Musikka. Elvy's a good friend of ours, and as she say here, she is one of the remaining 4 federal medical marijuana patients, and she goes to Florida every year, as it mentions here, to pick up her medicine. So while she was down in that part of the country, she's helping out Georgia as they're trying to work on the legalization for cannabis oil. It's only the oil they're working on in that state right now, but anyway, Elvy is a real trooper, a real fighter, and we really appreciate her help. And she'll be coming back to Oregon to help us with the Oregon legislature as they work on Measure 91. It's really irritating to see a bunch of people that don't know anything about marijuana, people that are prejudices against marijuana, that are actually working on implementing our law that has made it legal, and they're going to implement the law the way they see fit. So it's a real challenge and it's a real battle. And just today, somebody said, "Well, what are you going to do? The battle's over. You won." And I said, "No, the battle's not over. We did win. We won. In fact, the way I explain it is, on Measure 91, we won a battle. We won a big battle, and we won a big battle really big. But it was a battle. The war continues. Even though we passed the initiative, Salem is trying to do its best to gut it, trying to combine both programs to save money, which I don't really quite understand because they're making buku money off the medical, so it seemed to me they don't want to keep that one for sure. But anyway, we don't know where it's going. It's just all over the map, and it's too early to tell. So we're looking forward to Elvy coming back and helping us join in the fight. And we've got some images there of Elvy, and especially with her medicine. They come in a round tin. They're pre-rolled cigarettes, joints. and she just has that whole can of
Coffee can, yeah.
kind of a coffee can thing of joints. So it's really interesting to see. And it's not too bad. In the past, it wasn't all that good, and then within a few years, it actually, she said, it got pretty good. And now it's kind of okay, but not quite as good as it was. So it's kind of meanders around, I guess.
Sadly, she could probably find better stuff here.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, she just uses that, I think, for cooking and that kind of thing, and she definitely gets some real good medicine from locally here. And the other big news, at least for the state of Oregon now, is this was in the Capital Press out of Salem, written by Eric Morrison, and this was on February 16th. State's first industrial hemp license goes to a Southern Oregon man. Edgar Winter says he and others will plant a 25-acre hemp field this spring, providing they get seeds. And this article saying, a man who was issued the first state permit to grow industrial hemp said he and a nonprofit group of growers and activists hope to plant a 25-acre field in southwest Oregon this spring. Edgar Winters of Eagle Point, Oregon, who describes himself as a director of the Oregon Agricultural Food and Rural Consortium, acknowledged there are problems obtaining seeds for planting and other complications, but said he is optimistic. Winters also said warehousing and processing facilities will be ready to go when a crop is harvested in late summer. We are in a position to do 40 tons a day at our processing mill, Winters said. We've got our ducks in a row. Getting seed to plant is one of the major hurdles. Importing it requires the approval of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and the Oregon Department of Agriculture and Oregon State University are working with the DEA on that process. In addition, Winters said a major Canadian hemp company, Hemp Textiles International, has a breeder's rights to its seeds and will not allow Oregon growers to retain seed for planting. Meanwhile, the existing state statute requires hemp seed produced in Oregon to be replanted. We're at a standstill, Winters said. He said hemp seeds might be available from Russia, Hungary, Australia, or New Zealand. We have to import to get started, Winters said. We don't want our farmers to sit around another year. Winters' Lydican profile lists him as self-employed and the Chief Operations Officer for Natural Good Medicines. It also lists him as a master gardener and involved in research and development services for industrial hemp. He said people often hear his name and mistake him for Texas rock and blues musician Edgar Winter. Ron Pence, who oversees the industrial hemp growing program for the State Agriculture Department, said the seed issue is one of the 3 tweaks the legislature may want to make it the 2015 session. As written, a 2009 state statute says hemp seed collected in an Oregon harvest can only be used to produce a new crop. Not crushed for oil or other high-value products, for example, or used as livestock feed, Pence said. The restriction appears to be an oversight. Another issue is the requirement for a 3-year growing and handling license and a 3-year handling permit, each of which costs $500 a year or $1,500 for the required 3 years. A person could easily invest $3,000 in a license and permit before spinning a wheel to produce hemp, Pence said. The fees may be restructured to an annual basis at $500 a piece, so a person could try his or her hand at it for a year at less expense. A provision that provides a minimum production area of 2.5 acres also may be reconsidered, Pence said. The Oregon legislature legalized hemp cultivation in 2009, but the law was never implemented because the Department of Justice classified hemp the same as marijuana. The federal classification remains, but the Justice Department said it won't interfere in states that have legalized hemp production if they adopt a robust regulatory system. Industrial hemp was included in the November 2014 ballot measure that legalized recreational marijuana use, possession, and cultivation. Hemp is related to marijuana, but has a much lower concentration of THC, the chemical compound that makes pot users high. Industrial hemp was widely grown and milled in the Midwest, especially through the 1940s, but faded. Supporters of hemp's revival note that it has multiple uses, including for fiber, fabric, food, oils, cosmetics, plastics, and many more. Russ Carroll, former head of the Crop and Soil Science Department at Oregon State University's College of Agricultural Services, has said hemp grown for fiber would do well in the Willamette Valley, but hemp grown for seed, probably a more viable crop, would require summer irrigation, Carroll said. Hermiston and Texas Valley and Eastern Oregon have warmer growing days than the Willamette Valley and would be the best places to grow hemp, Carroll said in interviews with the Capitol Press. Now that's interesting that they mention that, because you see Hermiston and Eastern Oregon, now that would probably work pretty well. There's been some concern that they were going to try to grow this hemp in Southern Oregon. And that's got the medical marijuana growers outdoors, especially medical marijuana growers in Southern Oregon, a little on the nervous side. And so there's the talk of even coming up some legislature to actually outlaw growing hemp in Josephine or I can't think of the other county that's next to it. But anyway, talking about maybe possibly creating a law where people can't grow hemp because it would pollinate the medical marijuana, which is female, and you don't want it. That's one of the things about law enforcement always used to complain about legalizing hemp. Well, if we had hemp fields, we wouldn't know whether it was illegal marijuana or hemp, And what they didn't realize is that they're going to plant them together or close to each other. You're going to keep them separated as far as you can, because you don't want the male plants around your female recreational / medical marijuana, any of that. So anyway, that's it's going to be interesting to see how that works out and see how they do, because I was wondering myself about the climate and all that, how hemp would grow. But I see this, and a fiber would be fine, but not so much for seeds, at least in the western half of the state. So that's really exciting. And finally, finally, we're going to get some hemp in the ground in Oregon, which has been a goal for a long time. I remember an activist friend of mine many years ago said, "Why don't we just rent some land up in the valley and just plant a crop? Heck with it, just do it." So that was about 10 years ago. So probably should have been a little further than we are now, maybe. So I don't know. But anyway, okay, we're going to take a break here, and we'll come back with the second half, and we're going to talk about jury nullification, which is something that we definitely need to spread the word on. We need to get the information out there. It's one of the few defenses that we have in this day and age. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the second half. That was the second half of episode 564, and you're here with DanK, your host, and your co-host, Jeremy. Jeremy's here with us tonight. Appreciate Jeremy coming in. We're going to talk about jury nullification. So this is a half-page flyer that I threw together a long time ago, and I handed out when I'm doing tabling and stuff. So Jeremy's going to read this one through for you and give you some idea on jury nullification.
The jury's secret power. Judges may not tell you this, but when you sit on a jury, you have the right to vote according to your conscience and to judge the law being applied in the case. As a juror, you are the final safeguard for justice. It is the judge's obligation to give the jury the wording of the law being applied in the case. If the judge fails to provide the wording of the law, or if you think the law he gives you is a bad or unconstitutional law, or a good law being improperly applied, or if there are other factors that would make you regret a vote to convict somebody, then it is your right as a juror to vote not guilty, even if you are the only juror who does, and you therefore hang the jury. You cannot be punished for the way you vote. Our lawmakers sometimes pass bad laws, and at times good laws have been misused. Throughout history, reasoning jurors have refused to convict fellow citizens who were accused of breaking the law. They freed tax protesters during the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794, refused to convict those who aided runaway slaves in violation of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, freed bootleggers during Prohibition in 1920 to 1930, and released Vietnam War objectors 1960 to 1970. When our country was young, all jurors were told of their right to judge a law as well as the facts of the case. Then the judges decided that juries should no longer be told of their power to act as a safeguard against bad laws or unethical lawmakers. Now the jurors are instructed to accept the law as it is given to them by the judge, even in cases where the law is clearly unjust. But now you know the secret. If you are selected as a juror, you have the right and duty to do the right thing, to follow your conscience, and to judge the law as well as the facts of the case. It is the only way to keep government in the hands of the people. I consider trial by jury as the only anchor ever imagined by man by which a government can be held to the principles of its Constitution. Thomas Jefferson to Thomas Paine, 1789.
Yeah, so there you have it. And that's something to remember and spread the word. And especially if you get called to jury duty, don't look at it as something that you don't want to do. Look at something that you might be able to do, pass on some justice, real justice. This was dated back in December 2011. It was in the New York Times, written by Paul Butler. Entitled, "Jurors Need to Know That They Can Say No." If you are ever on a jury in a marijuana case, I recommend that you vote not guilty, even if you think the defendant actually smoked pot or sold it to another consenting adult. As a juror, you have this power under the Bill of Rights. If you exercise it, you become part of the proud tradition of American jurors who helped make our laws fair. The information I have just provided about a constitutional doctrine called Jury Nullification is absolutely true. But if federal prosecutors in New York get their way, telling the truth to potential jurors could result in a 6-month prison sentence. Earlier this year, prosecutors charged Julian P. Hickelman, a retired chemistry professor, with jury tampering because he stood outside the federal courthouse in Manhattan providing information about jury nullification to passerbys. Given that I have been recommending nullification for nonviolent drug cases since 1995 in such forums as the Yale Law Journal, 60 Minutes, and YouTube, I guess I too have committed a crime. The prosecutors who charged Mr. Hickelman said that advocacy of jury nullification, directed as it is to jurors, would be both criminal and without constitutional protections no matter where it occurred. The prosecutors in this case are wrong. The First Amendment exists to protect speech like this. Honest information that the government prefers citizens not know. Laws against jury tampering are intended to deter people from threatening or intimidating jurors. To confront those laws to justify punishing Mr. Hickelman, whose court-appointed counsel described him as a shabby old man distributing his silly leaflets from the sidewalk outside a courthouse, is not only unconstitutional but unpatriotic. Jury nullification is not new. Its proponents have included John Hancock and John Adams. The doctrine is premised of the idea that ordinary citizens, not government officials, should have the final say as to whether a person should be punished. As Adams put it, it is each juror's duty to vote based on his or her own best understanding, judgment, and conscience, though in direct opposition to direction of the court. In 1895, the Supreme Court ruled that jurors had no right during trials to be told about nullification. The court did not say that jurors didn't have the power or that they couldn't be told about it, but only that judges were not required to instruct them on it during a trial. Since then, it's been up to scholars like me and activists like Mr. Hickelman to get the word out. Nullification has been credited with helping to end alcohol prohibition and laws that criminalize gay sex. Last year, Montana prosecutors were forced to offer a defendant in a marijuana case a favorable plea bargain after so many potential jurors said they would nullify that the judge didn't think he would find enough jurors to hear the case. Prosecutors now say they will remember the actions of those jurors when they consider whether to charge other people with marijuana crimes. There have been unfortunate instances of nullification. Racist juries in the South, for example, refused to convict people who committed violent acts against civil rights activists. And nullification has been used in cases involving the use of excessive force by the police. But nullification is like any other democratic power. Some people may try to misuse it, but that does not mean it should be taken away from everyone else. How one feels about jury nullification ultimately depends on how much confidence one has in the jury system. Based on my experience, I trust jurors a lot. I first became interested in nullification when I prosecuted low-level drug crimes in Washington in 1990. Jurors there were predominantly African American, nullified regularly because they were concerned about racially selective enforcement of the law. Across the country, crime has fallen, but incarceration rates remain at near record levels. Last year, the New York Police Department made 50,000 arrests just for marijuana possession. Because prosecutors have discretion over whether to charge a suspect and for what offense, they have more power than judges over the outcome of a case. They tend to throw the book at defendants to compel them to plead guilty in return for less harsh sentences. In some jurisdictions, like Washington, prosecutors have responded to jurors who are fed up with their draconian tactics by lobbying lawmakers to take away the right to a jury trial in drug cases. This is precisely the kind of power grab that the Constitution's framers were so concerned about. In October, the Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia asked that a Senate hearing about the role of juries in checking government power seemed open to the notion that jurors can ignore the law if the law is protecting a terrible result. He added, I'm a big fan of the jury. I'm a big fan too. I would respectfully suggest that if the prosecutors in New York bring fair cases, they won't have to worry about jury nullification. Excuse me. Dropping the case against Dr. Hickelman, Mr. Hickelman would let citizens know that they are as committed to justice and to free speech as they are to locking people up. Paul Butler, a former prosecutor, is a professor of law at Georgia University George Washington University, and the author of Let's Get Free, A Hip-Hop Theory of Justice. So that's what jury nullification is about. And excuse me. And real quick article, this is dated back in April 2012, and it's actually about Mr. Hicklin, written by Benjamin Weiser. This was in the New York Times. The next time 80-year-old retired chemistry professor takes his protest to the plaza outside the federal courthouse in Manhattan, he may make it home without being locked up. A federal judge on Thursday ordered the dismissal of an indictment against the professor, Julian P. Hicklin, who had been charged with jury tampering for advocating the controversial position known as jury nullification while outside the courthouse. Mr. Hicklin had repeatedly stood with a jury info sign and handed out brochures supporting nullification. The view that jurors who disagree with the law may ignore their oaths and vote to acquit a defendant accused of violating it. Prosecutors said such advocacy, directed as it is to jurors, would be both criminal and without constitutional protections, no matter where it occurred. But Judge Kimba M. Wood of Federal District Court wrote that a person violated the jury tampering statute only when he or she knowingly tried to influence a juror's decision through a written communications made in relation to a specific case pending before the juror. So anyway, so it is legal, and thank Kevin that Mr. Hicklin was released, and so now he can continue his work. So anyway, that's where we're at on that, and stay tuned. We'll be talking about Measure 91 and the implementation thereof by our legislature. So thanks for stopping in and checking out the show, and I always like to have some visitors, and come on in. We have 2 tonight. Welcome to our visitors, and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.